You've walked into the studio today, and I've clocked that you don't look that old. I reckon ballpark you're about the same age as us. So you haven't lived through a lot of these massive market changes that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So I want to understand how you learn about them, how you research them, and how you kind of draw out the lessons from them, because I'm sure whatever you're doing, we can try and emulate as well. So what has been your process to kind of ignore the noise of the moment and like learn about more longer term trends?
Okay, so my background is actually I qualified as a lawyer.
Oh, okay.
And I joined Orbis at an amazing moment to be like as a kind of student investor in 2008. So the week after I joined Orbis, Lehman went bust.
So you have lived through some big market ruptures.
And actually it's a wonderful time to learn, because I had none of the psychological pain of everything falling apart, but I got to kind of go into the store in discount mode in 2008, 9 and 10 and see that you had these big dislocations and see what real panic looked like. And then I got to see how people who'd been at Orbis for a long time operated in that environment. And so, stocks were moving wildly in the press and in the headlines. And then I'd look internally at what's happening at Orbis, and people were saying, is this business good value on a 5 to 10 year basis? Like where are the best values that I can get today? And can I find a business that's resilient to what's going on today, which is terrific value? When everyone else is kind of losing their heads, they had a very cool approach. And then I said, well, and then we looked at the returns that delivered. I was like, this is quite promising. And we had a great track record as well. I guess it comes from a place of humility, not thinking that I could reinvent the wheel. The best thing I could do at that point was learn from Orbis. And we had Orbis that had been around at that point for 20 something years. We had our sister company Allan Gray in South Africa, who'd been doing the same thing since 1973. And so I kind of tried to learn from all the case studies that we had through that period of history, and that made me curious to go further back. One thing we are bizarrely good at is writing everything down and recording it. So every piece of research that's ever been produced in Orbis is in our document management system. And so if I want to go and read about what were people saying about Cisco in 1998, there's a document for me to go and do that.
Wow.
Or I can go further back and read about what were people saying about Japan stocks in 1990. And so that archive was actually very useful in kind of gaining historical perspective into what we're living through.
So I imagine the Allan Gray archives, if they go back to the 70s, there's probably a lot of parallels to today, because, back then it was no one gets fired buying IBM, and there was those nifty 50 stocks that everyone was buying, and the market was quite clustered and consolidated, similar to the mega cap stocks today. Does the archive go back that far?
I haven't looked back to the 70s.
Okay.
I've focused that was a South African focused business.
Oh, they weren't globally.
Orbis is the global investor for Allan Gray. So I've kind of stayed in that realm. But you can definitely go and see the pressure that people are under when they were owning, brewing companies and supermarkets in 1999, when everyone else owned Pets.com and Cisco. And you can see the conversations. We've minuted all the meetings, so you can see the conversations that were people having and just scratching their heads and saying, this can't last. But the pressure was there because we were underperforming. Yeah. And they held firm, and they owned very boring businesses. I'll come back to boring businesses later, but they owned very boring businesses that were kind of, not even people were kind of necessarily negative about. They were just complete apathy. They were just not exciting. They're nothing, interesting to write about them. When, all those other stocks, the sentiment came down, it was these things. And, the performance we delivered owning really boring businesses for several years was incredible.
Have you guys put all those documents through AI?
We are in the process of doing that.
I'm just imagining the wealth of information you're drawing.
We do have an external service where we've loaded all our data into. And so now we can go and start to draw out the patterns and the lessons using natural language, which is pretty powerful. And it's amazing that we're in the process of, you can bring people to life. So we are on a journey to be able to ask, what would this person have said about X?
Oh, wow.
So Allan Gray, our founder, has passed away several years ago. There are now tools that will be available so you can bring someone to life and ask for their opinion about a stock based on what they've said previously. We can't do that yet, but it's pretty exciting to be able to do that in the future.
It's crazy.
I'm looking forward to the Warren Buffett version of that.
So I've seen somebody has done this for Warren.
Okay.
So they've loaded every transcript, every interview that he's given, and now they have an Ask Warren GPT.
Wow. All right, well, that's the rest of my day done.